it's Laura from Crafty Not Shifty, and today I have my March Love From Lizi 10 cards 1 kit using the card kit featuring a stamp set that was created as part of a collaboration with myself, so I'm really excited to show you this one. So for this first card I'm using a green card base. For all of the cards in this video I've taken the cardstock provided in the kit, cut it in half and then folded it in half to make 5.5 by 4.25 size note cards. So for this one here I've just taken one of the cut apart pieces. This has got the apothecary like sweet jars. I actually have a jar like this in my kitchen that's full of midget gems. I'll probably share a picture of that over on my Instagram when I share these card pictures over there. So I've used that, and then one of the stickers, I actually cut this part out of a larger sticker and found that it just nested really nicely in the banner shape that was already on this card. So to add a little something extra to this, I'm just taking the sequins that were provided in the kit. This is kind of a shaker sequin mix. It's just a sample bag, and you can go ahead and get a bigger bag from the shop. And I'll have links to all of this in the description below. At the time that I'm recording this, there are actually kits still available, so you can go ahead and pick up your own kit if you're feeling inspired. So here for this next card, I went ahead and did a whole bunch of die cutting. So these nesting hexagon dies came in the kit, and also the specialty cardstock that I'm cutting. So I just took a couple different colours of the metallic shine cardstock, and I cut a whole bunch of these hexagons out. And I'm not going to make you sit through and watch all of that cutting, so I was just showing you here what I did, and then I'll skip through and you can see I've got all those hexagons laid out on my desk. So I have here a black card base, and I'm just laying everything out to see how it fits, making sure that I'm happy with where I have the pieces before I start committing and gluing them down. I just eyeballed this to try and make sure I had an even sized gap between each of them. It's not perfect, but it's a handmade card, so it's very rare you're going to get something handmade that is perfect, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out. So I'm just using some Lawn Fawn glue and just going ahead and sticking down each of those pieces. And you'll see I actually change glues quite a lot throughout this video. I actually think I'm using Tombow at the moment. I must switch to Lawn Fawn later on. There isn't really a rhyme and reason as to why I do this. It's generally just because outside of this tiny rectangle that you're seeing on my screen, my craft desk is a huge mess. So particularly when I'm working making these 10 card 1 kit videos, I find that I'm just flying through all these different cards and pulling out different supplies and pushing them out of the way of the video screen, and things get lost. So you'll notice that I switch to different adhesives quite a lot throughout this video. If there's any particular reason why I'm using an adhesive and another one wouldn't work for that particular technique, I'll make sure to let you know. Okay, so I've skipped ahead and you can see I've just filled in that entire card base with all the different hexagons, and I've made sure that they fall off the sides and the top and the bottom to make this look almost like a patterned paper piece. And I'm just sticking those down, and then I'll trim off any of the excess. So it was a little bit tricky with this tiny space here, but I got there in the end. And you'll see in a second I'm going to pull out the stickers that also came in the kit. And these are beautiful alphabet hexagon stickers, so they worked really well with the dies. So I used these stickers to spell out hello, and you'll see that I didn't start in exactly the right place here, so I had to kind of move everything around and shifted things about so I could fit in that second L. And then I went back in with the word friend. So I've just got this sped up. It took me a little while kind of placing each of these stickers, finding the one that I needed and making sure they all nested in perfectly. But I'm really pleased with how this card turned out. So my next card is actually going to be using the stamp set for the first time. And I'm actually going to have a technique here for how you can colour on vellum. So here I'm using Stays On ink. It's an ink that works really well with vellum. It can be quite difficult to get an ink that will stick and dry on vellum without smudging it. So I used this particular ink here, and I actually heat set this after I'd stamped it just to make sure that I wouldn't have any smudging. So I've actually gone ahead and turned the vellum piece over, and I'm just using my alcohol markers to colour on the wrong side of the vellum. So this will give a slightly muted look to the colours that you use, so you may find that you want to use brighter colours than what you want to end up with. But this is a really easy way to be able to colour on vellum, and I think many of the vellum cut apart pieces that came in this kit lend themselves to stamping and colouring, so this is just one way that you can do that without having an issue on the vellum. So I'm using my trusty creator sticker machine from Xyron here. This is my favourite way to adhere vellum. So the nature of the vellum, because it is obviously transparent, it can be quite difficult to stick it down. So you can get away with hiding glue behind any foiled pieces. So for example, this one has a foiled frame, so that would have been quite easy to stick down. But if you use the creator sticker machine, it applies a thin layer of adhesive all over the back of that piece, and essentially that will hide your adhesive. So I've stuck that down, the vellum piece, onto a watercolour piece and then trimmed that out. And I have here a pink card base, and I'm just layering up some of these sticker frames, and I'm making sure to tuck underneath any edges of that frame my vellum piece. So once I was happy with the first frame, I'm just going ahead and adding the next frame on top, the green layer, and I think this is just a really nice way to frame up that image in the centre. So this particular card, as you can probably tell by looking at it, this isn't the same size as all of the rest, which are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I trimmed this card down so it would fit nicely with the frame that were provided in the stickers. So once I had that all stuck down, I just took a strip of the pink cardstock that was used to create the card base, and I'm just stamping on that one of the sentiments. Excuse my head getting in the way there. So we have "You are the sweetest," and I just cut that out and added some teeny tiny foam squares, and then just mounted that up on the front of the card, just to give it a little bit more interest, because it is quite a simple card, although I think with that shine and the dimension, it's got a really nice effect. So moving on to the next card, and I have a card panel here in my MISTI and 3 of my stamps, and I'm just using a Copic friendly ink to double stamp these images. I really like that with the MISTI, the way that you can stamp multiple times to make sure you get really crisp black images, and it's really helpful whenever you stamp on watercolour paper, which tends to have a texture, just to make sure that your stamp doesn't skip any areas. I'm just using regular cardstock here, but I just thought I'd let you know that tip. And now I've got my Copic markers, and I'm just going to work my way through colouring in this image. I didn't do anything special here, I just laid down some colour, so I will actually skip some of this. And once I had all 3 coloured in, I wanted to add some ground underneath. Now, I'll admit I used too dark of a marker to start off with this, so I took my T-square ruler and just added some ground underneath this piece, and then attempted to blend that out. If I'd have started with a lighter grey, it definitely would have looked a little bit better, but it's just a card. I'm not going to stress over it. I'm happy with how it turned out, but if you were to recreate it, my tip would be to use a lighter grey to create your ground. So I added here the sentiment, "A party without cake is just a meeting." I really like that sentiment, it does make me laugh. So I stamped that here, and then I'm just mounting this piece onto a plain white card base. And then just to add a little something extra, I decided to bring in my glossy accents and go over some of the frosting pieces on the cupcakes. So glossy accents, if you haven't used it before, when it first is applied to your image, and that's essentially what it's used for, to highlight an area in an image, it goes on kind of milky, but then as it dries, it's perfectly clear, it has a lot of shine and also some dimension. Okay, on to the next card. So for this one here, I've actually took a piece of vellum that I ran through my creator sticker machine and then laid that over the top of one of the cut aparts. And you'll see here as I turn it over, the outline image on the vellum matches perfectly with the image on this cut apart piece. So it was just a really nice way to add some, almost like a foiling effect to that piece, and also like a frosting over the top of the image, which I think looks really nice. So I've covered a card base completely in one of the patterned papers, nothing special, just applied some adhesive, stuck it down and trimmed off any of the excess, and now I'm applying some of the ribbon that came in the kit. To do this, I've actually applied some double-sided sticky tape onto the back of the ribbon, and then I just peel off the backing and lay that down on my card. Now here I'm applying some foam squares onto the back of this piece. I'm not a huge fan of these particular foam squares, so I won't have these linked in the description below. It tends to be, if foam squares are very inexpensive, there's usually a reason. In my experience, I found it's because it's very difficult to get the backings off, or perhaps maybe the foam will kind of fall apart as you're using it, which was the case with these ones here. So I won't have those linked below, but I'll see if I can link some that I do recommend. I've also applied some of the peel-offs just to kind of highlight any of those horizontal lines, just to add some interest here and there. So then on top of this section here, I will add a sentiment, and my sentiment's going to come from the layered chipboard add-ons. And this one here says, wonderful. Once I'm happy with where that's positioned, I'll go ahead and cut off any of the excess peel off. And then I did originally think I was finished with this card, but I was looking at my supplies and I decided I couldn't resist just adding in some of these cute gems. So I'm just using my craft knife here to pick up the gems and just kind of scatter those around the background of the card, and then that is that card finished. So on to the next card. Here I'm taking a piece of craft foam. So this is brown craft foam, and this is going to coordinate with the card base that I use. And I've just added one of the pieces of patterned paper, and I've cut this down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it's the same size as a card base. And I'm just trimming off any of that excess craft foam, and then I'm actually going to cut a piece out of the centre here. And there is a method to my madness. There's a reason why I'm doing this. It's because I'm going to create a raised element to my card base, and also a element that will be kind of sunken in this well that I'm creating. So that should all make sense in just a minute. So once I was happy with the section that I'd cut out, I'm going to go ahead and grab my card base and just stick this down. So I'm sticking down a piece of patterned paper that will sit in that kind of sunken back section here, and this is again just one of the patterned papers from the kit, and then I'm going ahead and adding on those foam pieces. So I'm just using my ATG to do that. And again, no rhyme or reason as to why I've switched from my liquid adhesive to my ATG. The liquid adhesive would work just as well with this craft foam. I guess one of the advantages is that this is less likely to kind of slide around once I've stuck it down, so it will stay exactly where I want it to be. And you can see I've actually trimmed this to be slightly smaller than the card base, so there is that kind of brown frame around the edge of the card as well. So I just wanted to highlight the difference between this raised and sunken area a little bit more, and the peel-offs are absolutely perfect for doing this. So they coordinate really well with that card base. So I'm just taking 2 strips, and I think these are the wider strips, and then I'm just placing those inside right up against that join, and then I'll just trim off any of the excess. And all of that excess for the peel-offs, I do actually go ahead and keep it. So once I've trimmed that off, I do just kind of take that and stick it back down onto the sticky sheet that they come on. One really good thing about these, and you can see I'm struggling with it here, is they don't firmly stick down until you press them down. So you can just lay them down, wait until you're exactly happy with the position, and then just go ahead and trim off any of the excess and push them down firmly. And to do that, you can see I'm just using my craft knife and I'm gently pressing over the top of those cut lines, and then I'll go ahead and stick those extra pieces back on my sheet. So the sentiment for this one, this is another favourite. This is fueled by cake, coffee and crafting. That is 100% true for me. Although having said that, I have recently just completed 30 days sugar free. So I've not been having any kind of chocolate or cake or crisps. I'm being really careful with the ingredients and all of my food, making sure there's no sugar added or kind of derivatives of sugar or sweeteners. And it's been really hard. So working with this kit whilst not being able to eat sweets was really difficult, but I'm glad to say I've finished those 30 days. I'm taking a short break and then I'm going to try again. So yeah, I can get back on my cake and my coffee and my crafting. I can have all 3 together instead of just the coffee and the crafting. So my sentiment, I added some clear embossing powder and then just heat set that, and I like to do that for a black sentiment rather than using black embossing powder, because any of those stray bits really will show up if you use a black embossing powder. Okay, so on to the next card. Here I've trimmed down a piece of this multicoloured striped cardstock patterned paper, and I've applied that on top of my cardstock. I used one of the stickers and added some anti-static powder tool just to kind of get rid of the stick, so I could apply some foam tape on the back. And again, these are those foam squares that I'm not a huge fan of, but I figured I've bought them, so I'll use them all up. And then I mounted that onto this pink shimmer cardstock, and then I'm just trimming that around, leaving a border. So I'm going to add this to my card base just using some liquid glue. And then I'll just place that down in the bottom right hand corner and just press that down. So next for this, I wanted to take 3 of the banner stickers and just kind of layer those up in the top right hand corner just for a decorative element. And I played around a little bit with the placement of these. I was very careful to peel one of them back up after I realised I wasn't quite happy with where it was, and I just altered the height and the position of these and just kind of nested them into each other just to create something interesting in that corner. Once I was happy with how I had them stuck down, I just trimmed off the excess, and then I'm applying some of the Limoncello Nuvo drops. Once I'd finished with that, I added one more sticker, this flower piece here, and I've just left that hanging off the edge. It was slightly longer than I wanted it to be, and again just trimmed off the excess, and then added a couple more of the Limoncello Nuvo drops. You may notice in my final pictures that my drops are in slightly different places. I smudged them all. So I am terrible for setting a card to one side to dry, forgetting that that's why I've set it to one side and putting something on top of it. So you may notice that my drops, I had to redo them. So now I've got a black card base here, and I'm taking one of the long 12-inch stickers, and this is kind of a picture frame piece. And I'm just laying that down. I used a pencil there just to mark the centre of the card, so I could roughly get this laying across the centre. And then I'm going to trim off any of the excess and do the same again in the top and the bottom third of the card. So because I did have these pieces hanging off the edge, and because my card base is 4 1/4 rather than 4 inches wide, I didn't quite have enough to cover all of the pieces, but that's fine because I will have a topper kind of covering wherever there's a gap here. So to make that possible, I took what was left and just trimmed that in half, and you'll see I'll put one side on the left hand side and one on the right hand side, and that's just a really easy way to make your supplies go a little bit further. So in that way I was able to cover the rest of the card base here. So it looks a little bit strange right now, but trust me, once we're finished nobody would ever know. So I have another sticker here. This one says best day ever, and I'm just laying that down onto some pink cardstock here. I actually, I don't know, I was really struggling with losing things when I was doing these cards, so I think I misplaced some of my card bases, and I think I've got a couple extra card bases that don't coordinate with the cardstock that came in the kit. I think maybe I brought in an extra white. I'm not too sure, I'll take a look when we get to the end. So I stuck the best day ever down and then just used the layered chipboard piece here to finish it off. So here is something kind of interesting. So I tried to create some lollipops using Nuvo drops, and I had a whole thing on my Instagram about this, and it actually worked really well on that kind of orangey coloured one. And the reason why is for that particular one I layered up the Nuvo. So I drew a circle onto some plastic, let it dry, laid the lollipop on top of it, did another circle on top, let it dry, then finished it off with another circle. I may have added a couple more layers than that, I can't really remember, but I found that you can create a really realistic looking lollipop if you layer up your Nuvo. It does take a long time, but I think it was worth it in the end. Okay, so here's 2 of those lollipops, and I've just created an oval focal point, and I've stuck that down onto a piece of patterned paper, and that's all stuck on top of a card base. So I'm using some ribbon here just to kind of tie those together and add a bow. You can see I'll fiddle with this for a while until the bow's the size I want, and then I went ahead and just added some adhesive onto the back of these lollipops. I was a little bit concerned as to how I was going to stick these down, and I think glue dots is probably your best bet. I used a combination of glue dots and also some liquid adhesive behind those lollipops. I'm just using some extra glue dots there just to go ahead and stick down the tails of the bow. Okay, so then to add my sentiment, I have the Enjoy vellum foiled piece. These are really thick, not vellum, sorry, acetate. These are really thick acetate pieces with a printed sentiment on the top. I really liked these. I just added my adhesive behind the foil. I probably could have run this through my sticker machine as well, but I decided to do it this way just to show you both options, and then I just used something to weigh that down while it dried. Once I was happy with that, I added the rest of my sentiment and just nestled that in underneath the word enjoy. So it says here, treat yourself, and then I'll just trim off the excess of that kind of tail of the letter Y. Okay, so for this card I've got my tape runner, and I'm just sticking down some of this rose patterned paper. I really like this particular paper, and I think it works lovely with the green card base. Here I've fussy cut one of these pieces, and I'm just showing how you Could use that top to bottom on a card and just trim off a little bit of the excess, but I'm actually going to create here a horizontal card. So I've added some foam squares, and you can see them sticking to my fingers a little bit there. As I say, I'm not a huge fan of these ones, and just pressing that down and then trimming off any of the excess with my scissors. I think that looks really nice. The jar, and this jar in particular, is very similar to the one that I have. As I mentioned, I'll try and pop a picture on Instagram so you can see that. Then I've added the layered chipboard piece. I'm just making sure that fits in nicely around this this kind of popped up dimension of that apothecary jar. So I realised here I wanted to add some ribbon, so what I'm doing is I'm actually cutting through the centre of those foam squares, and that's a really easy way to be able to kind of undo what you've done with foam squares and be able to get underneath that piece to add an extra element. So here I'm sticking down the ribbon with the cupcake pattern, and again to do that I've just applied double-sided sticky tape to the back of the ribbon and then just pressed that down. I'm adding an extra foam square just to be able to stick that piece back down, and then I'll go ahead and press that all down and then trim off the excess. So I actually used some really strong Tim Holtz scissors to be able to cut through that chipboard piece, and it did actually manage that without any problems. So you could stop right there, but I decided once again to add some more glossy accents right over the top of that jar just to give it some realistic shine. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back in all 10 cards. You might notice that my nail varnish has changed colour. It's not magic, it's just that I did this a couple of days later and I changed my nail varnish by this point. So I'll bring back all 10 cards and show you them. As I mentioned, the kit still is in stock on the Love From Lizi website, so if you've been inspired by this video, then please do go ahead and check out that link and you can get your own kit. You can buy it as a one-off, or you get a discount if you subscribe. It is too late to subscribe and get this kit as your first kit, but if you set up your subscription now, then you'll be in place ready for next month's kit, and I'll have all that information linked in the description below. So I love the shine on that card here. I think that one's my favourite. I think if I had to pick either that one or the card with the 3 cakes, I think they're my favourite. So as I mentioned, this stamp set was created in collaboration with myself, and that is the first time I've ever done anything like that. So I'm really excited to see you all using the stamp set and letting me know what you think of it. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't already, then you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the icon in the centre of the screen, or you can check out a couple of the videos that are on screen right now. If you haven't seen them already, go ahead and click on the links and that will take you straight through to the videos. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you back here again soon. That's all from me. Bye for now.